The reading today will be from John 20. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. He saw and believed. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to where they were staying. Now Mary stood outside the tomb, crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell him, I am ascending to the Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with this news. "I have seen the Lord," she told them, she had told him that he had said these things to her.
Thank you, Abby. Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Easter. Great to see you. And great to see you if you're watching online. I don't know if you in the room realize this, but we've got hundreds of people who are watching this online. Now, one of the things I just said to Steve, that you realize if you go on our YouTube channel and watch back anything, I realize I've made a tactical choice, which was an error this morning, because I'm wearing a dark shirt, which means for you watching now, all you can see is my head and my hands, with possibly a couple of lights coming off the sides. But what a morning to be together. What a morning. I was just reflecting. This time last year, I spoke on Easter Sunday, but we pre-recorded it on top of the Downs. I don't know if you remember that, because we weren't able to meet, and what a joy it is to come together. But I'm really mindful that whilst we have the privilege of coming together, like in many churches, there's still lots of people, maybe you watching at home, who are struggling with your health or not comfortable in sort of being in a gathering yet, or for whatever reason. I know we've got people sometimes that tune in who are working abroad, working in China like Tom. I just want to say to you particularly this morning, happy Easter. You're very much part of what we're doing here today. So Abby, thanks so much for a great reading of the Bible. And what an amazing story we have in John chapter 20, just some of the resurrection story. What always strikes me, I don't know if it strikes you, is just, I suppose, the unexpectedness of it. When you read it or hear it, it's just like nobody's expecting this. Do you know, a number of years ago, the Pepsi-Cola Corporation had an advertising campaign actually in China, and they just couldn't work out, the executives couldn't work out, this just isn't flying like our normal kind of advertising campaigns do. You know, it's not bringing in the revenue that we'd normally get a hit from this. It's just not happening. And then they realized that the Pepsi-Cola slogan of the time, "Come Alive with Pepsi," had been mistranslated on all the advertising. Rather than saying "Come Alive with Pepsi," it said, "Pepsi brings your relatives back from the dead." Now, depending on your take on that, either you might want some or not. You think, do I really want to drink this? I don't know. But in some ways, this whole the whole Easter thing, it's just bizarre. Do you know, last night I was listening to a podcast by a couple of guys, James Holland and Dominic Sandbrook, called The Rest is History, and they were focusing in on the crucifixion. And they, said the historical facts are there, it's totally documented, it happened, there's no denying that. But they said it's just bizarre. What sets Christianity aside from every other religion and belief is God coming in human form and being crucified in a criminal's death, like a slave, the lowest of the low. This is the Savior that we're singing and worshiping today. God, not shouting from heaven to help us, not shouting from heaven trying to direct us, but God coming in skin to die on the cross for our sin. And in this story, originally I was thinking, we could just read the whole of the gospel narratives and you just hear the surprise. Mary thinks Jesus is the gardener. The two disciples who run to the tomb, they're just like incredulous. And you read on in John chapter 20, the disciples are all locked in the room for fear of the Jews that have crucified and the Romans who've crucified Jesus. And Jesus appears amongst them. And you'd expect him at that moment, the people that had betrayed him, his friends had turned their back on him, for him to say, "Come on, guys, where were you when I needed you?" But he doesn't. He says, "Peace be with you." And maybe you need that today. Maybe watching online, you need that. You need to hear the voice of Jesus saying to you, "Peace." Even in the beautiful moment, thank you, Agrippa, for praying on our behalf to God. Peace be with you, Jesus says. And we have, in this account, Mary. She encounters Jesus. She runs back to the disciples, and this is what she says. She says, "I have seen the Lord." Now, they were skeptical, but you can imagine as she I don't think she casually went into the room and said, "Oh, by the way, everybody, I've seen the Lord." You can imagine as she went into the room, breathless probably from running, saying, "I've seen him. I've seen the Lord." And then if you read on in John chapter 20, there's a moment after Jesus says, "Peace be with you," to the disciples. Thomas isn't with them. And Thomas, we call him Doubting Thomas. Thomas isn't there. He says, here's what they say to him. He comes back. This time it's a corporate thing. And they say to him, "We have seen the Lord." Would that not convince you? Well, it didn't convince him. He said, "Unless I put my fingers in the nail marks in his hand, unless I put my hand in his side where the Roman spear went in, I will not believe." Jesus appears to him, and Thomas says to him, "My Lord and my God." And Jesus said, "Blessed are you." He says, "You have believed as you have seen, but blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed." And that's us. I've seen the Lord. That's the reason I'm standing here. I've seen the Lord. Now, I haven't literally seen him, physically seen him, but he's changed my life. Do you know, one of the thrills personally that I have is I am involved in something called Alpha. Alpha is an introduction to Christian faith. Believe it or not, I went to the very, very first Alpha conference that our lovely friends at Holy Trinity Brompton ran. I went in 1993. I went to that first conference, and I remember at the time, I was a church pastor in Crawley, and I went up to this. If you don't know, we've got a couple of people who work at Holy Trinity Brompton here. But it's a beautiful church. It's opposite Harrods, and lovely people there. I ended up working for Alpha in the end. But I went to this first conference, and I remember sitting there, and these people would stand up. And here's what had happened, you see. They were different to me, but they'd seen the Lord. And this is what I'm saying, and please forgive me for this attempt at an accent. They say, it's so wonderful the way when we do Alpha, when people come who don't know Jesus yet, people come and we just tell them about Jesus, we have supper together, and they just come to meet the risen Jesus. Now, please forgive me, if that's the way you talk, I'm really sorry. Do you know, when I worked for Alpha, I was telling this story in the Highlands of Scotland about going to this conference. And I remember, because I was living in Crawley at the time, I said, in Crawley, we don't have supper. Nobody knows what supper is in Crawley. I'm sorry, I know there's people in Crawley here. And I remember thinking, Alpha, this will never catch on. Well, it's only 27 million people have done it. But this dear lady was saying, and in this conference, I hadn't planned to say this, no one's saying this. In this conference I was speaking, and I told this story about how I said it would never catch on, and did this impression of somebody who talks like that. And this lady came up to me after, she goes, do you know, I speak like that. I thought like that, yeah. And I go, oh no, I don't believe it. I've seen the Lord. They've seen the Lord. And we've just finished a couple of Alpha courses. I've got some of my Alpha friends here, not all of them, some of you watching online. But one of the really fun things that we do on Alpha, well, I thought it was fun, you can ask them afterwards, but is just as a way of kind of getting to know each other on Zoom, I say, look, have you got a claim to fame? Do you know what I mean by a claim to fame? It's like, have you met somebody famous? Have you done something that's noteworthy? That sort of thing. And I think this particular crop of Alpha people is probably the best that we had yet. So, okay, number one, lovely Charlie. Okay, I said, have you got a claim to fame? She goes, oh, I don't know, not really. And then she says this, that she was on telly with the Chuckle Brothers. I know that's a cultural reference. You might know what that is. Google it now. Yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? And they said, oh, yeah, and also I was on the Generation Game with my family with Bruce Forsyth. Come on. That's all right, isn't it? But then another guest kind of ups the ante and said, yeah, he's involved in the entertainment industry. Ends up kind of almost like doing a duet with Stevie Wonder in a sound check. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. And then, there's so many that we had. So many that are just so utterly amazing. People that are related to world-famous people and all sorts of things. And then sadly, because I'm hosting it, it comes down to what my claim to fame is. And it isn't that good. And I'm going to tell you, I've built it up and now it's coming crashing down. My claim to fame was this, that I went through all the heats, and it's competition. I went through the heats, the local heats, regional, kind of right through. I got to the All Britain, so all the nations in the United Kingdom, All Britain, okay, so that's everybody from all the different countries. I got to the All Britain Aircraft Recognition Competition Final. Used to be a plane spotter, but I now go to Plane Spotter Anonymous, and I find it really helps me just to meet other people that are trying to break out of that. So what is that? You think, what, a competition? Yes, it was in the Royal Air Force Museum's place there, got a cinema there, and here's what happened at the final, okay? We were all in this cinema, and they would flash up on the screen pictures of aeroplanes, and you had to write down what they were. No laughter, please. And because it was at quite an elite level, sometimes the planes were like obscured by trees and things. So we're talking, and I think I ended up 19th, which I thought was quite a claim to fame. The silence says everything. Now, the reason I say this is because two significant things have happened to me. One of them linked with that. So because I was interested in aviation, I studied photography at college. I had to do a special project. My special project, I did it on aviation. I went up to Heathrow Airport with my friend, who's a professional photographer now, and we were on the way up there. And unlike most people, we're on the London Underground. Most of you familiar with the Tube, London Underground. We're on the train. It's absolutely rammed. As we're going to Heathrow Airport, we were there, but unlike everybody else, we were getting off at the stop before, the maintenance stop. It's called Hatton Cross. We were getting off there so that we could get some pictures of planes and stuff like that. So the train pulls in. It's absolutely rammed. My friend, the door's open. My friend goes to get off. I'm following him. I'm carrying a tripod in one hand, my camera bag in the other hand. As I go to get off, because I'm tall, I don't know if you noticed that, I ducked so my head didn't hit the thing. As I ducked, the doors of the train started to close. It's not a problem. I've been in lifts before. I know what to do. So what I do is I put my hands out like that because it sensors and it bounces back. But I didn't realize that on those tube trains, it doesn't have that safety system. So the doors start to close. I put my hands out, nothing happens, and it closes on my neck. So I am now, my body's on the train, but my head isn't. This isn't a good moment. And for a split second, I'm thinking, all sorts of things go through your mind. I'm thinking in a minute, it's going to be the tunnel wall. So I'm stuck there. And obviously, there's a lot of people on the tube looking now. But it's okay. Look, I don't want fear here this morning, because Jesus said, I bring you peace. So I don't want you now thinking, oh, we had a day out in London plan. What if that happens to me? I don't want you fearful, because actually, the doors have a fail-safe mechanism. So if something gets caught, here's what happens. A handbag gets caught. Automatically, it realizes we need to release the doors. So it does this. It goes, So not only is the door closed on my neck, but then I'm being assaulted by a tube train. It's like a sort of, kind of like chasing dragon, crouching tiger film. I'm just getting like this. Eventually, the door opened. Kind of, reeling from this. But by this time, everybody on the train has seen what's happening, and they're gutting themselves. They're absolutely wetting themselves. Well, not literally, hopefully. Laughing their heads off. I stumble out onto the platform, and I remember I was actually quite annoyed and thinking, and then relieved. And probably even now, around the world, I don't know, in other countries saying, you're members of England, are you? There's a head. That's my Irish accent, by the way. I'm from Dublin. Not very good at accents. First significant thing that happened on the London Underground. Second one had a much bigger impact on my life, even than on my neck. And that's why my neck's so long, by the way, in case you wondered. See, when you meet people that have seen the Lord, something happens. You realize, like Mary, when she runs back, I've seen the Lord. There's something compelling about it. There's something that rings true about it. And when I was a teenager, we had some, in the block of flats we lived, we had some people upstairs who were Christians. Well, I wasn't a Christian at the time, so I think they were, because we used to hear them singing, like I had a small group or something around their house. And I remember my dad just get really annoyed about it. But my mum made friends with them and used to go around and pop around. She obviously saw something in them. There was something compelling when they were sharing that they, maybe not with these words, that they've seen the Lord. Well, here's the bottom line. See, my mum got cancer when I was a teenager. And as she was dying, here's what she said to me. She said, I'm just trusting in Jesus. And I didn't know what to do with that. See, in many ways, I was like the two disciples that we read about, Peter and John. Mary comes and says, well, they've taken his body. I don't know where he is. And they run to the tomb, and it says that John got there first. He didn't go in, but he looked, and there was something. The grave clothes were there. in a way that they wouldn't have been there normally. It was like a miraculous thing. And he's looking, trying to make sense of it. And in some ways, I was looking at my mum dying, saying she's trusting Jesus. And it's like I'm peering, I don't quite understand. And years later, trying to make a success of my life, working in the city, coming home on the London Underground, the second thing that happened was this. I ended up sitting next to two guys, two young lads. I was in my 20s at the time, sitting next to them, and they would see. There's a protocol to commuting. I don't know if you know this. If you commute in the UK, there's a protocol, which is nobody speaks to each other. Nobody speaks to each other. So you could stand on the same train platform every morning. You see the same people. People stand in the same place on the platform. And you could be standing next to the same person for maybe 30 years, never speak to them. You could turn up one day just to see what reaction you get from the people you see every day. You could turn up with a copy of the Financial Times under your arm, buck naked. They wouldn't even look second glance. The police would arrest you. So there's a protocol to commuting by train. In the UK, either underground or whatever, you don't talk to people. And I'm sitting next to these two blokes, and they are having just a fascinating conversation about bands and music. And okay, here's another thing that you do. Here's part of the protocol. You listen to other people's conversations who don't know the protocol, but you pretend you're not listening. So I'm sitting there like this, but I'm really listening. I'm really, really listening. And then one of them turned to me and said, "What do you think about that?" And I immediately chimed in. I thought, oh no, I've broken the rules. They now know I was listening. So I felt somewhat indebted to them because of that. And this conversation, it wasn't awkward at all. They were lovely guys. This conversation unfolded, and here's what happened. As we were approaching Tooting Bec Tube Station, one of them said to me, he said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah, sure." Paul, first name terms by this stage. "Yeah, go for it. Ask me a question." Here's the question he asked me. He said, "Have you ever read the Bible?" Didn't say it like that. "Have you ever read the Bible?" Because that would have been really weird. He just said, "Have you ever read the Bible?" Oh, God, it's your worst nightmare, isn't it? Trapped underground with somebody you thought was normal. And now they're saying, "Have you ever read the Bible?" I was not prepared for that, not prepared for it at all. Maybe that's how you feel today. You've been dragged here as a friend, or, your mum and dad said, "Oh, come to church, it's Easter, come on, it's special." And you go, "Oh, God, do I have to?" "Oh, God, so I hang out with all those religious weirdos." Well, look, I just want to assure you, I feel like that every week. Honestly. You see, these two guys, they'd seen the Lord. And I said I hadn't read the Bible. And they said a little bit about Jesus. And it was like, there I was. It was like the tomb was empty. It's like something about what they said was drawing me to look in. And I couldn't quite see, but somehow I can sense there's something about what they're saying. Do you know what? Watching online, you can sense there's something about what I'm saying about Jesus. That he was crucified, died for our sins, crying from the cross when he died willingly. It is finished. In other words, all the sin, all the wrong, all the shame, all the guilt that you and I have has been paid for. There's something about that is compelling. Even if you like those guys at the tomb, you don't fully understand. And that's why often people come on Alpha. It's because they sense, this life, isn't it? They sense it. They sense there's something more than just this. And you see, I've seen the Lord. That's what Mary said. I've seen the Lord. So these guys, I'm sensing, I'm sensing something. And they invite me to look at the Bible. They gave me a Bible. Remember, they gave me a Bible. A few days later, they gave me a Bible. I thought, God, this must be like £10. Giving it to me for nothing. Oh, mugs. But I remember as we got off the tube, I said, it's really nice to meet you guys. Really interesting. And there was something about it, it just kind of made me feel something was going on. And I remember saying, great to meet you. And they said, tell you what, why don't you give us your number? And we run this Alpha type thing. Why don't you give us your number and we give you a call? And that's the moment, isn't it? What do you do in that moment? What do you do in that moment? Okay, a number. It was really awkward, isn't it? So I thought, I'll give them my work number in my office. So I gave them the work number. Didn't think too much more of it. Anyway, following Wednesday, when this thing was on, get a phone call, unsuspected, pick it up. Hey, Kieran, it's Paul. Paul from the tube. Paul, hi. You know that thing you said you're interested in coming to? Yeah, and all the time I'm talking, but in my head I'm thinking, how can I get out of this? How can I get out of this? Yeah. Are you still coming? Yeah. How can I get out of it? How can I get out of it? Yeah. And I went. And that's why you're here today. I know that feeling. And I got to hang out with people who were ordinary, who weren't weird. And their story was they'd seen the Lord. Not just individually, but like the disciples after Jesus appeared to them. They said, we've seen the Lord. That's their story. And my story was going on this journey where I realized, you see, watching somebody die is not fun. Yeah, and I've watched my mum die. I'd lost friends. And I know there's people here today, you're suffering with grief. You're suffering because you've lost loved ones, maybe even during the pandemic. It's not good. It just looks like, doesn't it? You go to the crematorium. The coffin's there, or the graveside. The coffin is lowered into the ground. It looks just such a hopeless end. But if what we're talking about this morning is true, that Jesus was crucified and rose again, it isn't a hopeless end. It's endless hope. It's endless hope. And you know what? I've seen the Lord. I looked into the tomb, and as I read the Bible for myself, because I'm not going to be brainwashed by this lot, as I read the Bible for myself, it was like the risen Jesus was calling my name, like he called the name of Mary there. Just as an aside, by the way, my mum and all her aunts wanted me to have Mary as a middle name. That's just an aside. Random. So when I read that, I thought, Mary, that could have been me. But as Jesus is calling your name, as you're kind of glimpsing into, maybe your response is like John. You can't quite see it all, but it actually says that Peter went straight in, but John looked, thought about it, eventually went in. And here's what it says in that Bible reading, so beautifully read by Happy. He saw and he believed. So right now there's an opportunity for you to say, I believe. I wonder if the band could come up. Thank you guys so much. And if you're able to, I'd love us to just pray together. If you're able to, I'd invite you to stand if you're comfortable. If you're more comfortable sitting or kneeling, that's fine. But why don't we just stand together? Do you know there's hope for you today, not only in this life, but there's endless hope for every single one of us here. Why? Not because of me, but because of Jesus and what he's done. And I'd love to lead us and you in a prayer where you say, Jesus, I want your peace. I want your hope. Open my eyes to see. So maybe just pray together. And this morning, this is a moment where you can say, Jesus, I want to see, I want to believe. Make that, just pray it in your head, in your own words. I want to see, I want to believe. God hears your prayer, your heart. And you can invite Jesus to be your own Savior, your master, your ruler. You can give your life to him today. How do you do that? You say, Jesus, I'm sorry for what I've done wrong. Do it now. Come on, watching online, do it now. Why not say sorry to God? Jesus, I'm sorry. Thank you, you forgive me. You wipe the slate clean. Come into my life by your Spirit, that I may know you, risen Lord. Amen. Let's worship together.